Hi, I'm Arkush from Pro Football Weekly along with senior editor Eric Edholm, and we're here to give you some analysis and some perspective on what happened on the first day in Judge Susan Nelson's court between the owners and the players in the current labor impasse. Now, the purpose of the hearings was the players' request for an injunction to enjoin the owners from locking them out. Well, the first argument made by the owners is that it shouldn't be in Judge Nelson's court because of the Norris-LaGuardia Act. Now, it's a law that was put into effect in 1932, and one of the provisions of the law is that it doesn't allow the federal courts to issue injunctions in nonviolent labor disputes. And what's ironic about it is the law was enacted to protect labor from management, from strike-breaking techniques. And Judge Nelson said, isn't there some bit of irony that the Norris-LaGuardia Act is designed to protect employees from strike-breaking federal judges? It should now be used to prevent an injunction of a wealthy, multi-employer unit seeking to break players. One could argue that's what this looks like. Could they not? And apparently the owner's lawyer, David Boies, had a real problem with that one.
Yeah, they said it took a little stammering for him to come up with an appropriate response. And it looked like for a lot of the day, according to the people that we spoke to who were in the room, Nelson was putting Boies on his heels. He seemed to be the one who was under fire throughout the process, wanting to get the majority of the answers from the NFL side of whether there was some legality, whether there was an antitrust exemption, now that there is a lockout, now that there is no football at this time.
And that leads to the owner's second point. They want Judge Nelson to say that this case doesn't belong in her court because that the decertification of the union was a sham. Now, in this case, Eric, nobody really understands how the judge is supposed to rule on what she thinks is in the players' heads and not on the law.
Yeah, and that leads exactly back to what the NFL is arguing, is that Nelson should rule on this case until the NLRB, makes its case as far as whether this was a sham or not. So, she said she's going to take a few weeks to decide what's going to happen in this. Could the other case be picked up in that time? Maybe, but most people seem to think that she'll come down with a ruling before that 2 weeks is over.
Yeah, the NLRB moves at the speed of glacial warming, so I don't think anybody worried about that. But now we get to the last point, which is the players' position that this is antitrust law, not labor law at all. It clearly belongs in her court, and that if she doesn't lift the injunction, that they could be done irreparable harm, damages beyond anybody's calculation. However, you had a great column at ProFootballWeekly.com this week where you talked to one of the leading labor experts, lawyers in the country, and he said that may be the weakest part of the players' case.
Yeah, I spoke with Matthew Cantor, who is one of the lawyers and one of the partners of the firm that oversaw one of the biggest antitrust cases in this country's history, and he said he read both briefs, he saw both sides' arguments, and he said, there's got to be proof that there's no way to determine what the damage will be. Now, the players might say that, hey, free agency, players who are unemployed, players who are injured, these are the guys who are being hurt, and there's no way to determine what their value lost is. So that may have to be the argument, although he said he didn't sort of hold water in his eyes.
And the reality is that almost every time the owners and players have gone to court, the players win. The owners on the law are not in a strong position here, and so they're asking a judge who we don't really know Judge Nelson that well, but she's an Obama appointee, probably a bit of a liberal judge. They're asking her to stretch really far to give them rulings in their favor.
And just based on the first day in her court, all indications were that she was putting the pressure more on the NFL than she was on the Players Association, or the former union, if you will. What does that mean? You can't judge it by itself. However, based on the past history, based on her inclinations as a judge, and based on what happened in court, you'd have to say that it's leaning in that direction in the early stages.
So here's where we are as we talk, probably 10 days to 2 weeks away from the ruling. We do know this: whichever side loses is going to appeal. But if she rules in favor of the players while the owners appeal, the lockout will have to be lifted. Most likely some form of free agency will occur. Where it gets really interesting, folks, though, the appellate court in Denver, a 3-judge panel, very, very conservative court. That we know. This could be in court all summer long. For more breaking news, analysis, and the very best in way we hear it, follow us right here at ProFootballWeekly.com and 24 hours a day at Twitter.